So Carl, when you get in, if you just speak up, we'll be able to see you.
Speaking
There
up
you
has never
are.
been a problem for me. I'm here.
Okay, sorry about that. A little bit of a hassle there. So for
Yeah,
those of
let me.
you, I'm going to just repeat the welcome again. This is a meeting from the South Park Coalition. We're a team of neighbors working together to make South Park a safer, cleaner, and friendlier neighborhood. All South Park residents are welcome to join us, and it's a great opportunity to get out and meet others in the neighborhood. Tonight, we have 3 candidates from the Sonoma County Sonoma County Sheriff coming to speak with us. We had Dave Edmonds, and now we have Carl Tennenbaum, and then we will have Kevin Burke. They will each be given half an hour on their own to speak, followed by a question and answer period. There's been some question as to why I did not invite all the candidates. The reason is because I didn't invite any of the candidates. They contacted us. So Dave Edmonds contacted us back in November. Carl contacted us last December, and Kevin contacted us earlier in January. I didn't know all the candidates that were running, so I set this meeting up, and then found out only on Sunday that there was Kevin Burke was running and wanted to come to this meeting. I said it was too late because the meeting was going to be an hour and a half already, and I didn't want to make it too long because people don't stick around, and whoever comes in at the end would not get a very fair shake. So if there's interest, I'm more than happy to have another meeting. I did not try to exclude anybody. It was the efforts of the other people who contacted us that made this meeting happen. So I would just like to put that out there. And because we have limited time, we have a list of questions that we will ask. And if you have additional questions, we ask that you put them into the chat, and we will have send them to the candidates to answer. So with that, I would like to introduce Carl Tannenbaum. And the people of Sonoma County have made it clear that they're ready for a more transparent and accountable sheriff's office. It is Carl's vision to create a more inclusive and trustworthy organization that embraces all members of our community. Carl was born and raised in San Francisco. In 1981, he fulfilled a lifelong dream to join the San Francisco Police Department, where he worked for 32 years. He held many positions at SFPD, including undercover narcotics officer, press information officer, white-collar crime investigator, sergeant in charge of street crimes, hostage negotiator, and field training officer. He relished his role as a mentor and training officer and as an instructor in the community policing concepts at the San Francisco Police Academy. Carl served for 10 years on the board of directors of the San Francisco Police Officers Association, working to improve relations between the officers and civilian oversight. Carl was an early supporter of Measure P, the 2020 Sonoma County ballot initiative aimed at strengthening the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach, known as SOLARO. In his spare time, Carl likes to work on his classic 1970 Dodge Charger. He enjoys cooking, is an avid New York Times crossword puzzle addict, and a diehard Giants fan. His other passion is performing weddings, which he has done since 2001. Carl lives in Sebastopol with his wife, 3 rescue dogs, and 3 rescue cats. He has 2 children. His daughter is an attorney in New Orleans, and his son followed in his footsteps and is a San Francisco police officer. We have for more information, you can visit Carl T for Sheriff. That's Carl with a C. And we will put his information in the chat box. And with that, I will turn this over to Carl, and then we will, after he speaks, we'll do a question and answer period. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. That's a very glowing praise. I'd like to know that guy. He sounds pretty cool. Thank you for having me here, and I want to thank all of the members of the South Park community and everybody present to hear what the candidates have to say. I realize that running for sheriff and the sheriff in Sonoma County is a really big job, and I don't approach it lightly. I want to tell you, I'm running for sheriff because it's time for a change in the organizational philosophy of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, one that recognizes our strongest asset in the community that we serve. The Sheriff's Office is a publicly funded organization, and the sheriff is elected by you, the people. As your sheriff, I will bring about a new mindset, one that's based on community involvement and participation, one that treats everybody with dignity, that listens, respects, and protects the rights of those people that we serve. Annette, you spoke about my background. I joined the San Francisco Police Department in 1981. I spent the 2 years prior to that as a paramedic on the city ambulances, working the streets of San Francisco. Throughout my 32-year career as a police officer, I worked in many diverse communities in San Francisco: Chinatown, North Beach, the Tenderloin, the Bayview Hunters Point, Japantown, the Mission District. Every one of those neighborhoods was very unique and very diverse in its own way, whether on cultural lines or racial lines. And in every one of those neighborhoods, I learned the different needs of those communities. And the one common denominator was that everybody in those communities wanted to be heard. And that's something that I learned was very important. And that's why I chose to spend my career on the street level, is working with those communities and having a direct impact, not only on the people that I serve, but the officers that I supervise. So having done that for 32 years, when I retired 8 years ago, I left the city that I loved and I adopted Sonoma County as my new community. And since I've been here, I've been very involved in a lot of the issues that we face like every other community in the United States. And I want to take my expertise and my experience as a San Francisco police officer and bring it here and address the problems with the sheriff's office. As Annette alluded to, I was a very staunch and active supporter of ILERO. And as a San Francisco police officer, I worked under civilian oversight. I worked towards making it a better relationship between the officers and the police association, the union, and the oversight committee there, or the oversight agency. What ILERO, the purpose here is for transparency and accountability and oversight. That's not asking too much. The deputies, as I said, the sheriff's office is a public entity, and there should be no secrets here. What the sheriff does, what the policies are, how they operate, with the exception of confidential or classified information, which should be very objective. The sheriff is responsible and accountable to everybody. So I worked on ILERO when it passed by a majority of the voters, and I will implement it. Once I'm elected, ILERO will be the law of the land. And if the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the deputies, we will meet and confer. We'll talk about what the issues are, but it will get done. It will be your sheriff's office, and there will be transparency and oversight. Another issue that I plan on attacking right away is the jails and the situation in the jails. Right now, we have what's close to being sort of a humanitarian crisis there, with the COVID outbreaks, the in-custody deaths, the increase in insurance premiums and payouts for wrongful deaths within the jails and also within the entire sheriff's department. That's another issue that I plan on tackling as your sheriff. I am critically aware of the homeless issue that's plaguing Sonoma County. Again, it's a problem that we're having nationwide, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And it's something that I will work with every agency and every community to ensure that the people who are unhoused are treated, again, with dignity and respect, and to make every effort to get them the help and assistance they need. It's not a crime to be homeless, and any crime that comes from the homelessness needs to be addressed on a social and humanitarian level. I think that's my elevator pitch, and I want to turn it over because, like you said, you have questions for me. I'd love to answer them. So please go ahead.
I'll start with the easy ones. What do you see as the role of the sheriff?
I see the role of the sheriff, like any law enforcement agency, the primary role of the sheriff is to ensure public safety. And that public safety extends to every single person who the sheriff or one of the line deputies encounters. And that includes people that are taken into custody or accused of crimes. The sheriff is there, again, as a public agency and as somebody who represents, as a person or persons who represent this county. Their job is to ensure public safety on all levels. And that's to ensure that people are safe and comfort and secure in anybody who enters Sonoma County should feel comfortable knowing that I'm the sheriff and we're running an organization that treats people well.
That would be very nice. How would you improve relations between the sheriff's department and the Latino community?
I think the short and simple answer is outreach. And the outreach takes on the form of being out there in the community. I personally, again, as a career beat officer and patrol officer, The best thing that a deputy can do, or that I can do as the sheriff, is to be out there in the community, listening to what the community needs, hearing what issues are plaguing the community, what the problems are, and also trying to get people to understand it's going to be a kinder, gentler sheriff's office where people are going to feel comfortable and comforted by seeing us. So it's a matter of exposure, of being out there, of having a nice, gentle touch to the people that we encounter, and that's how we build community within the Latin community.
Okay. And if elected, do you promise to release the data necessary to determine if systemic racism exists in the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How would you hold deputies accountable for their actions?
I would hold deputies accountable for their actions by partnering with ILARO and with whatever internal affairs or investigative body that we have, and legitimately holding those deputies accountable. In my experience, most officers, just like I have every reason to believe that most deputies go to work every day to do their job professionally and with respect. As it's based on the type of work that police work is, or that law enforcement work is, there are going to be encounters with people that are hostile or violent, and there are also going to be days when the deputies are not on their best behavior. However, when a deputy makes an error or a mistake or screws up, or even if it's something done maliciously, they're going to have to be held accountable for it. And depending on the degree of what it is, the punishment will be fit the crime.
Thank you. If the county imposed mask mandates, would you support that through the department?
Yes.
And how will you combat the Good Old Boys Club?
I have to pause for a second here because that question's been posed to me before, and it's a sad commentary on where we are in this sheriff's office, that people perceive, rightfully so, that there's a good old boys network, and that people, rightfully so, or no, not rightfully so, people are afraid of the power and strength that the good old boys, the sheriffs, the deputies hold. And how I would counter that is, number one, as the leader of this organization, of the person who's going to inspire some change, first of all, we have to look at what the genesis of that is. But the bottom line is, as the leader, I will bring in high-ranking administrative officials who embody the new spirit of what we're doing. Police work is changing. Police work is evolving. People have higher expectations of more professionalism, and breaking up or impacting the good old boys network would also be manifested on the ground level by actively and aggressively recruiting people who represent the community, who are not part of the good boys network or syndrome or system or whatever you want to call it. So it's a top to bottom change in philosophy, and also by the personnel that we would staff.
Thank you. And what is your opinion of the thin blue line flag, seen by some in law enforcement as a symbol of solidarity and seen by others as a symbol of racism?
Personally, I'm not a fan. I'm not a believer in it. I feel very strongly that I support the men and women in blue, or in this case up here in green and gold. I think that policing is a very noble profession. We need police officers. However, it's an occupation that people consciously choose. You make a choice to become a police officer, you make a choice to leave. You're a paid public servant, or they are paid public servants, and as such, they're supposed to approach their jobs professionally. I get and understand the camaraderie and the unity, but to have some symbol beyond the uniform is not necessary. We don't need to be making any sort of a statement that separates. The goal is to reduce the distance between the sworn personnel and the civilian population, and get away from the us versus them stigma. And I believe the thin blue line flags symbolize, just again, it's a symbol that's not necessary.
Thank you. And if you would be what would your policy be towards ICE coming in to try to get somebody after they've served their time?
My policy would be that, with the exception of a judicial warrant or some exigent circumstances, there is no reason for me. Any person that's in custody who's gone through due process of the law and has served their sentence is what their immigration status is not of any concern to me. And if ICE were to come in, I would be very reluctant to cooperate with them. There's a state law that dictates when an agency shall cooperate with ICE, and I think that would be it for me.
Thank you. And can you explain how you would implement equity in relation to race, ethnicity, and gender?
How I would implement equity within the organization, or just, I'm sorry. So are you speaking specifically within the organization or just in
Yes.
general?
Yeah, it was a question that just came up in the chat. So they asked, how would you implement equity based on race, ethnicity, and gender within the department?
As I alluded to earlier, it would be a very, very robust hiring standard. Right now, I believe the numbers that I read recently, less than 5% of applicants get hired in the sheriff's office. And the majority of the applicants that the sheriff's office hires are lateral hires. Now, I am not inferring that there's a problem hiring somebody laterally, but what does happen when you hire somebody laterally is they've been trained through basically the standard academy that we have that needs a statewide standard that needs to be upgraded. And the laterals come over and they bring the bad habits that they've learned at other agencies. So a robust ground up recruiting model that encourages people who have more diverse backgrounds, not necessarily the criminology background, and reaching out into those communities, sending deputies into our various communities throughout Sonoma County to actively recruit, whether it's we develop an Explorer program, something to make young people inspired to be officers and to get people in the communities that reflect Sonoma County. So it would be hiring, and then also there will be openings at the upper echelons of the sheriff's office. And as senior members in command positions retire, I will staff those positions with people who have credible law enforcement experience that also represent the community that we all live in.
Can you tell us what restorative justice is, and would you support it?
Yes, I would. I would restore it. I would support it. Restorative justice is a very common sense philosophy and approach to the criminal justice system is structured now. Is we have a set of laws, and when somebody violates the laws, they are subjected to a trial or some sort of a judgment, and then they are punished. And there's historically been very little consideration for the entire all of the participants in any given crime. And I think a simple example is if a person shoplifted and the store owner just wanted the item back and didn't want the person arrested, that would be a consideration for restorative justice. Restorative justice is considering the wants and the needs and also what's in the best interest of society when it comes to enforcing laws. So absolutely, I 100% support restorative justice.
How would IOLERO assist your efforts to improve community relations?
IOLERO is a county agency, and as a county agency, just like all the other county agencies and the other elected officials, we're all in partnership here. So IOLERO, by virtue of their role in ensuring transparency, working with me to ensure transparency, would give credibility, restore credibility to the sheriff's office, and also establish their credibility as being an effective oversight agency. And collaboratively, we, along with the district attorney's office and the public defender's office, could reach out to those communities and let people know again that law enforcement in Sonoma County is going to be a safe haven. So IALERO would be a complement to the sheriff's office.
Thank you. How would you train your deputies on racial bias and to be aware of when they might be coming into a situation that makes them snap?
The training would start from day one, and the officers and deputies would be trained. There's a state program, it's actually a national program, implicit bias training, and it's a good classroom workshop that really delves deeply into that. It needs to be, like I said, it needs to be started from day one, and then it would be reinforced all along the way. When I talk about the organizational philosophy, the overarching sheriff's office that I would be running, the philosophy would be backed up by policy. And the policy would be very firm in what's expected of the deputies, coupled with their training that goes back to disciplinary issues. If I, as the sheriff, determine that there's any racial animus or behavior by the deputies, it will be meted out. And that will reinforce the training and implicit bias training. Everybody has some implicit bias, and we all need to acknowledge it and recognize it and work to improve that we don't act on it.
Excellent. We have 7 minutes left. Are there any things you would like to share with us in that time? Or I can, if there's any questions, I was trying to see if there's any in the chat here. One person wants to know if you belong to a local church.
No, I do not.
Okay. We answered that question. What would you do to promote physical, emotional, and mental health in the department? Kind of answered some of that.
What would I do to promote physical and mental and emotional health? I think I would encourage the deputies to engage in healthy behaviors, whether it's having a nutritional consulting person or a yoga instructor. I think it's incumbent upon the individual deputies to realize that being healthy physically and mentally benefits them, and I would encourage and try to lead as much as I could in that regard to inspire them to stay healthy.
And how do you imagine dealing with white supremacy within law enforcement?
There's no place for it. There's no place for any hate-based or extremist views of any type. And once something like that, if something like that were to become, if I were to become aware of it, or if there was an allegation made of that type of behavior, it would be very, very thoroughly investigated, to the point that if it were legitimate and bona fide, I could see referring that to the state attorney general to investigate from outside, because that's a matter, I think, of national security concern right now with the domestic terrorism that we have going on, and yes, so it's something that has to be rooted out right away. And again, the organizational philosophy is there's zero tolerance for that.
Thank you. I'm still looking for a few other questions here. They want to know if we can put your email in the chat.
Yes, absolutely.
And what is that?
It's Carl, my first name, at carltforsheriff.com. And the website is carltforsheriff.com. And I encourage you to please go there. You can read more about me. I didn't want to bore you all with my story here today, but there's a lot there about me, and there's also an endorsement page and a donate page, and I cannot encourage you enough to go there and support me.
All right. Anne, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I'd like to ask how officer training can be changed so that we don't have another Andy Lopez instant incident.
Thank you.
Annie, that's a wonderful question, and it touches on something at the heart of why I'm doing this. The Andy Lopez killing occurred 2 months after I moved to Sonoma County, and it's one that I think has been poorly handled from start to finish, from the moment that happened until this very moment when nobody's reached out to that family, and to fight it to the Supreme Court is a grave injustice. How I would train that is, number one, how I would address that. In law enforcement to this very day, and going back to 40 years ago when I started, there is an overemphasis on physical control slash force slash violence. And it's not balanced out with enough cultural awareness, social awareness, empathy, and sympathy. I would actively reduce the fear-based training that most deputies and police officers are exposed to, and balance it out, or even overbalance it with a sense of community. Andy Lopez is a tragedy that should never have happened, and that's how I would address that. To definitely work on less violent results or means to deal with situations, and more awareness of social situations.
Thank you. Well, we have 2 minutes left. Do you want to have any final words?
I want to thank you for having me here, and I want to tell you that, a year ago, I really did some soul searching about getting into the sheriff's race. I loved my job. I took great pride in being a police officer. I think every officer or deputy should take great pride when they put that uniform on. And after 3 months of consulting with a lot of people, I decided that I wanted to do this. And I'm doing it because I'm passionate about law enforcement, and I'm more passionate about my community and the people that I serve and that I work with. When I look back on my career, my greatest source of pride is working in different communities and dealing with the situations that those communities have. I know that there are other candidates in this race that have very strong management resumes and educational resumes. But I am the person that did work on the streets, that really believes in the community. And I know, having spent so much time on the community, what the problems are, and having spent so much time as a police officer, what the solutions are. And it's not as complicated as some people want to make it think. So I really, I just want to tell you that my heart is in this, and I encourage you very strongly to look into my platform and follow me on this campaign. And I ask you for your support, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Carl. And with that,